She stood among countless others, shackled and silent, her once brilliant violet scales dulled by grime and scars. The alien slave market was a place of misery, filled with beings stripped of dignity, their cries ignored by cold overseers. The air reeked of despair, thick with the acrid smell of fear and rusting metal. Traders barked prices, their voices a cacophony of greed. Buyers prowled like predators, eyes gleaming with cruel intentions. She barely registered their presence anymore. Pain had become a constant companion, numbing her to everything else. Her slender form trembled under the weight of heavy shackles that clanked with every movement. Memories of past masters haunted her, beatings for imagined slights, nights spent in dark cages without food or water. Her kind, once revered for their grace and intelligence, were now coveted for their aesthetic beauty, valued as living ornaments rather than sentient beings. Her gaze remained fixed on the ground, avoiding the leering stares of prospective buyers. Hope was a distant, forgotten thing. She had learned long ago that resistance only brought more suffering. Silence was survival. The auctioneer's booming voice barely registered in her mind as he listed her supposed virtues in degrading detail. Rare specimen. Strong, obedient, and beautiful even in this state. Who will place the first bid? Grunts and jeers followed. Bids were tossed around carelessly, each one sealing her fate anew. Her heart didn't quicken, she had no energy left for fear. Whatever awaited her next was merely another chapter in an endless nightmare. Then a silence fell over the crowd, palpable and strange. She sensed it before she dared to lift her eyes, a shift in the atmosphere, as though something had disrupted the grim rhythm of the market. A voice, calm and authoritative, cut through the noise. "I'll take her." The words were simple, yet they carried a weight that silenced even the auctioneer. The speaker was a human, standing tall amidst the grotesque alien bidders. Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy, their presence often met with fascination or hostility. This one radiated neither aggression nor arrogance, only an unsettling calm. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The auctioneer hesitated, visibly unsure how to proceed. "The bid is high, far above standard rates," he stammered. "I said I'll take her," the human repeated, his tone unyielding. He tossed a data chit to the auctioneer, who scrambled to catch it. She blinked, confusion piercing through her numbness. What did this human want with her? Was he just another master hiding cruelty behind a calm facade? Her instincts urged her to prepare for the worst. The human approached her, his gaze steady but not invasive. He didn't leer or smirk like the others. Instead, there was something in his eyes she couldn't place, something unsettling in its gentleness. Without a word, he unlocked her shackles, letting them clatter to the ground. For the first time in years, she felt the weight lift from her limbs. Yet the chains around her heart remained tightly bound, skepticism and fear refusing to release their grip. As he extended a hand toward her, she hesitated, unsure whether to grasp it or flee. "Come on," he said quietly, not as a command but as an invitation. She stared at the offered hand, her mind torn between distrust and the faintest glimmer of something long forgotten, hope. The market was still buzzing with murmurs of disbelief as the human led her away from the platform. She stumbled slightly, her body weak from years of mistreatment. He didn't rush her, keeping pace with her faltering steps. Silence hung between them, heavy with unspoken questions. Her mind raced with confusion and apprehension. Why had a human paid such a steep price for her? What did he want? Humans were unpredictable, some were fierce warriors, others curious explorers. Yet none were known to frequent slave markets, let alone make such extravagant purchases. They reached a sleek, unmarked transport docked on the outskirts of the market. The vessel gleamed under the harsh artificial lights, a stark contrast to the grim surroundings. The human pressed his hand to a biometric panel, and the ramp lowered smoothly. "Go ahead," he said, his voice calm but firm. She hesitated, instinctively glancing back at the market. The slavers wouldn't pursue her, she was officially his property now. Yet stepping onto the ship felt like crossing into the unknown, and the unknown was dangerous. Seeing her reluctance, he spoke again, softer this time. "You're safe here. No one will hurt you." The words sounded absurd. Safety was a concept she had long forgotten. But there was no trace of deceit in his voice. Against every instinct screaming at her to run, she stepped onto the ship. The interior was minimalist but clean, with soft lighting that didn't assault her senses. He led her to a small room with a cot, a basin, and a cabinet filled with medical supplies. "You can rest here," he said. "But first, let's take care of those wounds." She tensed, prepared for rough handling. Instead, he moved with practiced gentleness, retrieving a scanner and antiseptic spray. She watched him warily as he cleaned the raw gashes on her wrists and arms. The sting was sharp but bearable. "Why?" she finally asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Why what? Why did you buy me?" He paused, meeting her gaze. "To set you free." The answer made no sense. Freedom wasn't bought in slave markets, it was a fantasy whispered among captives in the dead of night. "You paid a fortune," she said bitterly. "No one spends that much without expecting something in return." "I don't expect anything," he said simply. "No one should live in chains." She wanted to scoff, to tell him that his idealism was naive. But the sincerity in his voice unsettled her. He meant every word. "You'll see," he added quietly, finishing his work. "Rest now. We'll talk more later." He stood and made his way to the door, pausing only to glance back. "No locks on this door. You can leave whenever you want." With that, he was gone, leaving her alone in the quiet room. She stared at the open door, disbelief gnawing at her thoughts. Freedom was still a foreign concept, but for the first time in years, it didn't seem entirely out of reach. Days passed, though she couldn't tell how many. The ship glided through hyperspace with a serenity that felt foreign after years of chaos. She spent most of her time in the small room, wary of venturing too far. Yet the human never forced interaction, never demanded obedience. He simply checked in periodically, offering food, medical care, and quiet conversation when she was willing. Her wounds healed faster than she expected, but the scars ran deeper than flesh. Trust was a fragile thing, shattered too many times before. Even the soft bedding and nourishing meals felt like traps waiting to spring. And yet, he never locked the door, never barred her from exploring. Curiosity finally nudged her beyond the room. She wandered cautiously, her eyes tracing the clean, efficient lines of the ship's interior. It lacked the opulence of vessels owned by her previous masters but radiated a sense of purpose and care. Every panel and control seemed meticulously maintained. She found him in the central cockpit, his hands deftly navigating controls. He glanced over as she entered, offering a slight smile. "Exploring?" he asked. She nodded, still unsure how to respond to his easy demeanor. "Good. You should feel at home here." Home. The word caught her off guard. She hadn't had one in years. "What do you want from me?" she asked abruptly, the question hanging heavy in the air. He leaned back in his seat, considering her words. "Nothing," he said finally. "Just for you to heal, however long that takes." The answer unsettled her. She was used to ulterior motives, hidden agendas. But he offered nothing beyond kindness, and that frightened her more than cruelty ever had. "You're different," she said, not as a compliment but a statement of fact. "Humans are known for that," he replied with a wry smile. "Sometimes it works in our favor." She folded her arms, still skeptical. "Why help me? My kind aren't exactly friends of humanity." He nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe that needs to change. Besides, we're all just people trying to survive, aren't we?" His words lingered in her mind long after she left the cockpit. Survival had always been her only goal, but he spoke as if there was more to life than merely enduring. Over time, their conversations grew longer, more comfortable. He told her stories of Earth, its vast oceans and towering forests. She found herself listening intently, imagining a world so different from the harsh planets she had known. In return, she shared fragments of her own past, cautious at first, then with growing trust. One evening, as they sat in the ship's common area, he pulled out a small device and played a piece of human music. The haunting melody filled the space, raw and beautiful. "What is this?" she asked, captivated. "Hope," he said simply. For the first time in years, she let herself believe it might be possible. Her transformation was gradual but undeniable. The timid, wary creature who had stumbled onto the ship was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who dared to dream beyond survival. The scars remained, but they no longer defined her. She had found her voice again, steady and confident. With the human's encouragement, she began learning the ship's systems. He taught her how to navigate the stars, repair engines, and communicate across galactic channels. She absorbed every lesson, her mind sharp and eager. For the first time in years, she felt capable, not just a prisoner of fate but a participant in shaping her future. One day, as they docked at a bustling neutral station, she hesitated at the threshold of the ship. Freedom was within reach, and yet she lingered. "You don't have to come back," he said gently, standing beside her. "The universe is yours now." The weight of the decision pressed on her. She had dreamed of this moment, true freedom without chains or obligations. But leaving wasn't as simple as she had imagined. "I've spent so long running," she said quietly. "Maybe it's time to stand for something instead." He didn't question her choice, simply nodded in understanding. Together, they ventured into the station, but this time, she walked with her head held high. Her presence drew stares, but she no longer cowered under scrutiny. Word had spread of the human who had freed a slave, and whispers followed them wherever they went. It wasn't long before others began seeking them out, beings trapped in the same cycle of servitude she had once endured. They came with stories of abuse, desperation, and shattered hope. She listened to each tale, her resolve hardening. This was her purpose now, to help those who couldn't help themselves, just as the human had done for her. Their mission grew beyond what either of them had anticipated. They freed captives from illegal auctions, dismantled trafficking networks, and challenged corrupt authorities. Her voice became a rallying cry, her story a symbol of defiance against oppression. But it wasn't just about fighting battles. It was about rebuilding lives, offering the same compassion that had once saved her. Beings of all species found solace in their cause, and a diverse community formed around them. One evening, as they stood on a platform overlooking a newly liberated colony, she turned to the human. "I never thanked you," she said. "You didn't need to," he replied with a smile. "You changed my life," she said firmly. "And because of that, we've changed so many others." He looked out at the bustling colony below, filled with laughter and hope. "We did it together." She nodded, understanding now that freedom wasn't just about breaking chains. It was about building a future where those chains never existed in the first place. And together, they had taken the first step toward that future.